Hi everybody, this is the GC surgery slides from the event that happened on the 23rd of February 2016. I'm just gonna start directly on it. GC surgery. Why GC surgery? First of all, because GC is a black box for many people. A lot of people know what it is, what it's for, but a lot of people don't really know how it actually works. And the result, GC has been treated as a secondary device, and even a lot of references of that GC is actually a secondary device because it doesn't really meter correctly. So because of that, a lot of times GC has been treated like a secondary device. It sits in the corner, and not enough maintenance, or sometimes even incorrect maintenance, is performed on the GC itself. And a lot of times preventive maintenance is performed just for the sake of performing maintenance. We do have some cases where some people actually knows that their GC is faulty, but because they do have a monthly maintenance scheduled on the GC, they do the maintenance anyway, because it's what have always been done before. So as a result, errors can actually occur in the GC without operators even knowing it, and the error can be really big. And here's some of the example of how big the error can be. All these figures that you see here is the values on a monthly basis of errors that we have found from our case study. So based on this, we can conclude that GC is actually really important. And to avoid all these errors, um, sometimes without even knowing it, to avoid that, we really need how to understand how the GC works. And that's why we come out with the GC surgery. So here are the GC surgery goals. First of all, we need to understand how the GC works, how the column works, how everything is separated within the column. And then once we know that, we need to understand how to interpret the calibration data, which is one of the most important process in terms of GC operation. The other thing, once we know that, we also need to understand how to monitor the GC performance so we can ensure that the GC working well at all time, not only instantaneous. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how to understand the work of the GC itself, and this is going to be covered in this first session of the surgery. First of all, we're going to talk a little bit about the introduction to the GC. It's very basic stuff. So, gas chromatograph is a device that analyzes quality of gas. It comes out with the result of small percent information. This small percent information can be used to calculate all the quality parameters of the GC, such as molecular weight, calorific value, density, etc., compressibility, etc. So it's normally located at the gas metering station or a gas metering stream, or in the pipeline or in the production platform. And the way it works is when we have a pipeline, it normally has a high pressure in it. So the pressure will then need to be reduced, and the job of the pressure letdown system is to reduce the pressure from the high pressure of the pipeline into the pressure that GC can handle, and normally around 2 bar. We also have the carrier gas, which is normally a helium in the thermal conductivity detector, and is normally used to push all the sample gas throughout the columns inside the GC. And then we also have the calibration gas that we use to calibrate the GC. And then the final element is the people that form the GC maintenance. It comes out, it becomes a whole system of GC analysis system. What we're going to talk about today, though, is we're going to focus on the GC bit, and we're going to try to understand how it really works inside the GC itself. Here's the basic principle of the way the GC works. If we have this component, let's say we have 10 racers in this race, and this is let's say it's a go-kart race. And the way it works, if we have a go-kart that has exact same engine, which is in the actual GC case, it will be the carrier gas itself. And let's say the size of the driver or the weight of the driver is represented by the size of each individual racer, which is pretty much the molecular weight of the gas itself. So logically, when we have a straight line race, the lightest racer will go the fastest, and the racer that will have the most weight will go last, and the simulation will go like that. So the lightest one will go first, and the heaviest one will finish last, basically. So if we see all the gases traveling in one long column, it will look similar like this. So to begin with, I'm going to talk about the terminology that I'm going to use a lot. And as you can see, we have a short for every single gas component. And a lot of times I'm going to use the short term of each individual gas components in this surgery itself. So let's say if we have one gas that travels across one column. So if we have added gas push the gas through the column, the gas will then travel something like that. So as we can see that we will have nitrogen as the lightest component will go fastest, and then is followed by CY, it goes to the heavier end, dependent on the weight of the gas itself. So we see the term as well, we term the light components as nitrogen all the way to ethane, and then the middle component will be propane to N-pentane, and then in this case we'll have the heavy end as the C6 plus or hexane and above. So before we go and talk about the flow inside the GC column, I'm going to talk about the components that build the GC. This is a diagram of a Daniel GC. So the components of it will be consisting of the carrier gas, and we normally use helium as a carrier gas. And the reason for it is because it has a highest thermal conductivity property, and it's also non-explosive. So it's also inert, that it doesn't really react to any of the gases on the hydrocarbon itself. So the carrier gas itself is used to push the the sample gas through the columns, and it is also used as an actuating pressure for the analyzer valve. So all this valve here, the three valves, will be actuated by the carrier gas itself. The next thing that we have is the pressure regulator there. The carrier gas goes into the GC, but then it gets reduced, and the reason for that is so that the actuating pressure, when it actuates, there's going to be a sudden dip in the pressure. What we don't want to have is an effect to the actual chromatogram itself when the actuating pressure changes. So the carrier gas is set to a slightly lower pressure in comparison to the actuating pressure. And this is done by this pressure regulator here. The next one that we have is the solenoid valve, and this is the solenoid valve that actuates the analyzer valve. So as you can see, it actually has the line that goes through the bottom and the top of the valve, which is the term that Daniel used for this particular GC. So what happened here, basically, when the valve is on, when the solenoid valve is on, it will decide which direction the gas will flow within the valve. So the dotted line here is going to be the flow path that the gas will use when the valve is on, and when the solenoid valve is off, the flow will go through the solid line. So the next one that we have is the carrier dryer, and this is used to dry the helium before it goes into the GC. the UK, we don't normally have this. In many different places, we do have the carrier gas dryer just to ensure that no moisture will get into the column, because the column don't like moisture, and it can damage the column as part of the moisture contamination. So therefore, that's why we have this carrier gas dryer. Next one we have is the sample shut-off valve. The sample shut-off valve purpose is to actually equalize the sample pressure into atmospheric pressure. The reason for it is that every time we sample the sample gas and enter it to the column, we want it to be pretty much the similar size to go in, and that size pretty much a normal pressure, which is whatever the atmospheric pressure is at that particular time. So before the gas is sampled, this sample shut-off valve will actuate, and therefore the sample pressure will equalize to the atmospheric pressure, and that's when the gas will be sampled and injected to the column 1. The next one is the analyzer valve. We have 3 in this particular case. We got the sample valve, which is the first one, or we call it SV. And the reason for the sample valve is because this is used to sample the gas. The second one is called the backflash valve, and the reason why it's called backflash is because it's used to backflash all the heavy end components so that it can get detected first. And the third one is the dual column valve, because this valve is attached by 2 different columns in it, and that's why it's called dual column. So the next one that we have is all the columns in there. We got column 1, column 2, column 3, and this columns is used to separate the heavy end from the middle end and the light end. So the column 1 will separate the heavy end against the middle end and the light end. So in column 2, middle end and light end will pretty much start with everything together, and then column 2 will separate all the light components, will then go to the column 3, and the column 2 will separate all the middle component into its individual components, and the column 3 later on will separate all the light components into its individual components. We're going to talk about it later on in the actual simulation of it. The next one that we have is the restrictor column. And the reason why we have the restrictor column is to match the flow rate when the gas flows through the column 3 and when the gas goes through the restrictor column. One of the property of the thermal conductivity detector is that it responds to changes in temperature. So in order for us to make the temperature stable on the detector itself, we need to maintain the pressure and the flow rate within the GC to be quite stable as well. So any changes in the flow rate will cause the change in the temperature, and it will cause the change in the thermal conductivity property. So the reason why we have this restrictor column is so that the flow rate will be very similar between the restrictor column and the column 3, so that we don't see too much of a change in the temperature, which will affect the overall measurement of the gas itself. The next one we have is the column 4. The reason why we have this column 4 is to delay the measurement of the gas. Basically, all the gases will go through the column 4, but in particular the heavy end. So what happened here is that the heavy end will go out shortly after we actuate the valve 2. But every time we actuate valve, we have a valve upset, what we call. So in the chromatogram, we will see a dip on the baseline, and it will then go up after that. So if we don't put delay on the measurement, what will happen is that the valve upset itself will interfere with the actual peak of the heavy end. So in order for us not to have the interference, we basically put a delay on it, so therefore we'll be able to see a full peak without interference through the measurement detector. The next one we have is the detectors itself. We got two detectors inside the GC. We got the reference detector and we got measurement detector. The reference detector will only have helium goes in through it, so it will never have any other gas. While the measurement detector will have both helium and the gas that is being measured. The way it works is it's actually a Wheatstone bridge. Every time we have the gas that goes through the measurement detector, other than the helium, it will change the temperature that goes through, and then the thermal conductivity detector will react to it. The resistance will change, and therefore it will create a voltage on the Wheatstone bridge. So this voltage will be in a form of a peak, and this is the one that will then be interpreted as a peak of each individual component. So once we know what it's all for, and we're gonna talk about the analysis cycle, and I'm gonna talk about all the stages that we have here in the Daniel GC. The basic principle of this can be used for any other GC that we have in the market. So when we see the Daniel GC, the first stage basically happens between 0 to 5 seconds on the C6 plus GC, and this is what we call a sample pressure equalization. So when we start at the beginning of the cycle, it will start with the valve 1 off, valve 2 on, and valve 3 on. So what happened here is that the sample gas will stop at the sample shutoff valve, and the sample gases will equalize with the atmospheric pressure. So if we see the first stage here, we can actually see that the sample gas here is stopped at the sample shutoff valve. And the reason for that is because this particular this particular flow from the helium is actuating the sample shutoff valve, and therefore the sample shutoff valve is shut. So what we see normally in the sample pressure is normally 2 bar, but because the sample shutoff valve is shut, then the line here after the sample shutoff valve will basically equalize to the atmospheric pressure. It goes out to the vent. So when we have the sample gas within the sample volume itself, it will be an atmospheric pressure sample gas. So later on, when it gets sampled and it gets pushed to the column 1, it will be always be the atmospheric pressure. If we see the flow, what we see, helium will go in through the reference detector, and then it will then go to the column 1 without pushing any sample gas. So it's still purely helium goes into the column 1, and then helium goes into column 2 through column 3, and then eventually it will go out through the measurement detector. So if we basically see the baseline here is still straight, because what we see is helium in the reference detector and helium out of the measurement detector. So we'll have a straight baseline. Now on the stage 2, we basically now turn on valve 1. So we inject the sample from the GC. What happened here is that the sample volume is taken at the atmospheric condition, and the sample is then carried into. As we see the diagram here, we can actually see that this sample shutoff valve is still closed, so it's still atmospheric pressure in there. And what we have is that helium goes in through the reference detector. It will then push the gas into the column 1. So what we see here is that the gas is basically pushing the atmospheric pressure, so the gas will flow into the column 1. What happened at the end of this particular cycle is that all the components that is being sampled will be there in the column 1. So then what we'll see here is that helium will still go into the column 2, we got helium in the column 3, and then what we detect in the measurement detector is still helium as well. So we still have a straight baseline at this particular stage. So on stage 3, what we have is heavy end separation. What happened here is that the sample is already injected to the system. Now all the gases will travel through the column 1. At the end of the cycle, what we would expect is that light and middle component will go through to the column 2, while heavy end stays in the column 1 just before backflash. So at the end of the cycle, we got to make sure that all the mid components have gone through the column 2, but none of the heavy component has gone to the column 2. If we see the diagram, we will see something like this. Again, we still have the sample shadow valve on, so it's still atmospheric pressure in the sample line. And in terms of the carrier gas, we see that the carrier gas will go in through the reference detector. It will then push the gas inside the column 1 into the column 2. So the gas will then travel. So what we need to make sure here that heavy end in column 1, it remains in column 1, because what might happen is that some of the component of the heavy end can also travel to the column 2. And the other thing that might happen is the end of the mid component, which is in this case is unpainted, can sometimes stay in the column 1 before the valve actually actuates. So we got to make sure that this basically happen. All the heavy ends remain in column 1, all the mid and light components go into the column 2. So what happens next? The helium will still go through column 3, and then through the measurement detector, and basically helium in, helium out, we still got a straight baseline. On the stage 4, this is what we call a backflash stage. So what we see here is that the valve 2 will becomes off. So we got the condition of valve 1 off, valve 2 off, and valve 3 on. When valve 2 goes off, it has to happen after all the C5 enters to the column 2, but before any C6 leaves the column 1. Because otherwise, we will then have a little bit of gases that goes into its unintended column. So what happened here as well, the sample shadow valve is de-energized, and the purging for the next analysis cycle starts here at around 25 seconds. Here, we can actually see that this purging will start for the next cycle because the sample shadow valve is now off. So it becomes 2 bars again, and we have a flow rate in there. And the reason for this, it will now purge for the next cycle. So when we get into the next cycle, we will have a fresh gas in the system. And we see the carrier gas, instead of going into the column 1, it will go through the column 2 first after the reference detector. And it will basically push the gas to the column 2 into the column 3. The gas will flow like that. So all the light components will go into the column 3 while the middle component stays in the column 2. Now, what we need to make sure here is that this needs to happen after all the mid and light components go to column 2, but before the heavy end go to the column 2. So this is what we saw before. So this C6 needs to remain here. None of the C6 need to go into the column 2 here. This is the beginning of the cycle. So when this happens, then we see the flow rate. It will go through there, goes back into the valve 2, but then it will go through the column 1 into the measurement detector. So we can see that now the heavy end, which is the C6, will go backflash, and it will flow through there, and it will go through the measurement detector, and it will create the heavy end peak at the end of the cycle. Now on the stage 5, it's around 40 seconds in the C6 plus GC. The valve condition will be valve 1 off, valve 2 off, valve 3 off. So we just basically turning off valve 3. And the function of it is to trap all the light components, and we separate all the middle components, and after that we detect all the middle components through the detector. So this needs to happen after all the C2 enters column 3, but before C3 leaves column 2. I'm just going to illustrate that here. What we see here, this one here is actually C3, and this component at the last here is C2. What might happen if the valve timing is wrong, some of the C3 might enter to the column 3, or some of the C2 might stay in the column 2. So either way, it's pretty bad because it will cause some of the gases goes through unintended columns. So what we need to make sure that This stage 5 happens after all the C2 goes into the column 3, but before any of the C3 go into the column 3. So as we see the flow, we see something like this. It's still purging for the next cycle, and then we see the carrier gas go through the column 2, and it will separate all the middle components. Again, this basically need to happen after all light components go to the column 3, but before any of the mid components go to the column 3. So if we see the flow, it will go through the column 1 and it goes into the measurement detector. So each individual gas will go like that, and each individual component will then be detected by the measurement detector. First one, the fastest one in the middle component C3, then IC4, then NC4, then Neo C5, IC5, and then NC5. So once that's done, then we can basically release the light components, which we get now to the last stage, stage 6. So stage 6 is light end release, and this needs to happen after all the C5 component clears the measurement detector. So we gotta wait until all the middle components go through the measurement detector, then we release the light end. Basically, we still have the sample gas still purging for the next cycle, and the gas flow goes through the column 2. Now it goes through the column 3, which basically release all the light components. All the light components will get pushed by the carrier gas. It will then follow the flow through the column 1 into the measurement detector. So all the light components will go like that. The first one over it will be the nitrogen, and then we will have the methane, we then have CO2, and then the last one is ethane. And because of this arrangement in this particular GC, we tend to see that the heaviest component will come out first, and then followed by the middle components, and then followed by the light components, which is a little bit counterintuitive when we see the first initial slide that we have that nitrogen will go first. But in this case, because of the arrangement of the columns, we will have the heavy end to go up first. And the reason for this is really good. It's all to make sure that the cycle time is a lot faster, because with the same arrangement, when you only have one single long column, this will be a very, very long process. So the next one that we go is the time event. We're going to talk about the time events that is happening in the GC itself. So the first one is inhibit on and off. So inhibit on prevents the GC from looking for a pick. So if we see a pick here, if we put the inhibit on before the pick, this particular pick will be ignored. And inhibit off allows the GC to look for a pick. So if we have a pick like that, then if we put an inhibit off before the pick, then the pick will be measured. So some of the rules about the inhibit, do not inhibit any part of the pick. So things like that, this area, if we put an inhibit off in the middle of the pick like that, there is some of the area will not be measured by the GC. The other thing is that sometimes you have a valve upset that looks something like that. So if we have something like that, always inhibit on the downward slope. So if you inhibit on the downward slope, anything that happen after the inhibit off will not be detected until the GC decide to start the measurement, which we call as an integration on. So then the measurement will start when the GC decide that it's time to start for the measurement. The other rule is that any other events which are not picks must be put in between inhibit on and off. It's just a good rule to have. So let's see this condition here. Basically, if we have inhibit off over here, and then we got a pick, and basically we have a pick width change here and slope sensitivity there. What we want to do is to put inhibit on and inhibit off as a window for width and slope sensitivity to happen. So we want to have inhibit on and inhibit off in between those events there. So after the inhibit off, then we can detect for the next pick again. The next one is pick width event. So basically, in the Daniel GC, the base time is sampled 40 times every second. So if let's say we have a pick width of 4, what it means that it only samples 10 times a second. What it means that if you can see the sample size here, this is an example of a pick width that happens, pick width equal to 4 and the pick width that is equal to 24. You can see the difference in the sampling frequency of the baseline itself. Now, basically, when you have a smaller pick width, it will give you a more accurate reading, but it's not designed to have all the smallest pick widths. So, for the efficiency, sharp pick, we need to have a small pick width, but if the pick isn't sharp, we can go with a wider pick width. And this is normally set in the factory, and it's just something that is good to know because a lot of times you see this event in the GC and wondering why it means. So this is again the rules about the pick width. So top pick, we need a small pick width, bigger pick, we need a broader pick width, which is 8 or 12, and it's normally set by the factory. Now, the other event that happens in the Daniel GC is the detect again, and the function of it is to amplify or lower the pick size within the chromogram. It doesn't affect any measurement within the GC itself. It's purely as a visual tool, and this is one of the example of the chromogram that we have, the various detect again setting within the GC itself. Now, this is chromogram of the same gas being measured by the same GC, only we basically remove all the detector gain. So all detector gain is set to 7, which is quite a high gain for a GC. Now the difference is you can actually see it's basically measuring the same exact gas, giving pretty much very similar result. But you can see that the chromogram on the green one is much magnified in comparison to the blue line. So, but it's pretty much each engineer's preference. It doesn't make any difference in terms of the measurement itself. Slope sensitivity. Basically, every signal will have a noise. When we have a slope sensitivity setting in the GC, it will make sure that the real peak is measured and not the noise. So what happened here is that when the slope gradient reaches the slope sensitivity, the GC decides to start the measurement, and it looks like a line that goes up rather than goes down the baseline. So the measurement will start when you see this particular line. So and only starts when the gradient reach the slope sensitivity value. And the higher the number of the slope sensitivity, the less sensitive it is to the peak. So it will reduce the noise basically. The other event that we see a lot in the GC is summation on and summation off. It doesn't happen very often on the C6 plus GC, but a lot of times it happens on the C7 plus GC. And the function of it is to sum several peaks into one component. For instance, on the hexane component, we have a lot of isomers of hexane, which needs to be included as one pick. Basically, we call it as a C6 pick or hexane pick. Now, when this happens, the retention time is then defined at the end of the submission event. And when this happens as well, all the pick will then be submitted together. So in this particular example, you see 3 picks, A, B, C. So the component will be equal to component A plus component B plus component C, and it's treated as one single component. The other event in the Daniel GC is a stream switch. Stream switching only works for auto stream sequence. So this is basically when we decide to do an auto calibration, let's say a daily auto calibration. What happens is that If we have a calibration sequence that will happen on the next cycle, the stream will switch between the process gas to the calibration gas. So therefore, the GC will purge the sample line with the calibration gas rather than the process gas to be sampled on the next cycle. So what happened here, the solenoid valve will change to start purging the next sample stream. It's either calibration gas or a sample stream. So if it's currently in the calibration gas and the next cycle will be back to the process gas cycle, then it will switch to the process gas stream. The stream switching happens after the sample injection, which normally happens at around 5 seconds. So this is the stream switching itself sometimes happens at around 7 seconds, but it varies on the different GC. So that's basically about most of the event timing that we need to understand inside the GC. A few other time events there that we don't see a lot in the GC, and therefore we don't really discuss it here. The next thing that we're going to talk about is how a real chromogram looks like. Let's analyze this chromogram. This is a healthy chromogram. We'll zoom in and analyze every single event. This particular chromogram starts with inhibit on, starts at 0 seconds. So every event that happened after that is basically happening in between inhibit on and off, you can see. And then we have an inhibit off in the downward slope before the peak so that we can detect that particular peak in there. So I would like to show you that this particular line here is actually showing red. Depending on where the location of that particular cursor is, this red line will change, and this basically corresponds to the highlighted event on the right hand side. So this particular event is basically showing that it is inhibit off that happens at 26 seconds. So as we go along, after the inhibit off, we then detect the heavy end, which is the heptane in this particular case, until we hit an inhibit on again. So as you can see, we got inhibit on over here because we got a valve-free event over here, which is not a peak, so it needs to be in between inhibit on and off. And we have inhibit off again here on the downward slope before the next peak. So as we go along, we can see after the inhibit off is that we can see all the picks now. We got pick detection of this particular pick, which is C3, and then we detect IC4 and C4, and we got Neo C5, and we stop again with the inhibit on. The reason we have inhibit on here is because we changed the pick width here to a bigger value because pentane is actually a broader pick than the butanes and the propanes. If we go along further, we then detect all the C5 components. So this component will be IC5 and then NC5, and we got an event there, which is the summation on, because we will sum all the hexane isomers into one single peak, which is the hexane. So this particular case, we only see one single peak, which is the N-hexane, because we only have one component in the calibration gas, which is the hexane component. So the summation will stop at summation off. So in the summation off, you can actually see the retention time of the N-hexane is happening at 306.5 seconds, but the summation off event is happening at 307 seconds. So we can see that the event, the retention time is set to the end of the event, summation off event, so that all the peaks in between summation on and off will be summated together as part of one single pick. If we go further here, we can actually see then we got a few events there, and after these few events, we got basically inhibit on and inhibit off to detect all the picks there. So as we can see here, before the nitrogen, we see the inhibit on over here. We got all the events that needs to happen between inhibit on and inhibit off, and we got inhibit off over here, which is basically happened just before the nitrogen peak to detect the nitrogen peak. And then what happened after that, we also have the nitrogen peak. Apologize. Move back a little bit. So we got inhibit on over here, and we got all the events there. We got inhibit off again to detect the CO2 event. So basically, all the events that is not peak will need to happen between inhibit on and inhibit off. If we go further from there, we basically then detect the CO2 peak, and then we detect the C2 peak or the ethane peak, and then it gets to the end of the cycle, so we put an inhibit on at the end of the cycle. And that's basically how we look at this chromogram as per what we have learned before. So, and we can basically zoom it in depending on what we want to see in the chromogram. So this particular chromogram is the calibration gas chromogram. And this particular chromogram is the chromogram of a process gas that has all the C6S isomers. So if you can see here that this particular line here is the start of the summation on, and this is the end of the summation, which is summation off. So all this particular peak, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 peaks. It's summated together into one hexane peak. So that's basically the GC surgery. We got question and answer session. Uh, so if you do have any questions, we'll try to answer all the questions. If you like, please join our GC group, GC surgery group in LinkedIn. Please search for GC surgery. And you've seen this presentation pretty much in my blog just now. And I look forward to any of the questions that you have. Thank you very much for looking at my presentation. If you do have any further question, you can contact me directly by email. Send an email to anwar.sultan@i-Vigilant.com or i-vigilant.com, or visit our website at www.i-vigilant.co.uk, or send us a message through Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Or you can also send an email to Jennifer Rabone at jennifer.raybone@swintontechnology.com, or visit Swinton website at www.swintontechnology.com, or visit their Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. So thank you again for attending the surgery, and looking forward to hearing from you soon.